it's Jennifer from Flux. Welcome to the Spring Summer Stashdown CAL update. So all year so far we've been working on the Stashdown crochet along. This is a year-long project on the Flux blog. And at the beginning of the year we learned how to make the square. Now here is our Stashdown blanket. We learned how to make this square, and I gave some tips on collecting yarn, creating kind of like your palette, whether you want it to be completely multicolored or if you want to kind of focus on a few colors. I've been focusing on grays, blues, and greens for mine. So mine is growing slowly but surely, and I am holding 2 and 3 strands of yarn together for each round. So even though it's not huge yet, there is so much yarn in this blanket. It has like a really substantial weight to it because of the amount of yarn. I am using a 9mm hook, so these strands of yarn that I'm using aren't super thick, but I'm holding a couple of them together to create a really bulky strand, and it's giving me this really warm, super cozy blanket. Now part of the fun of this is collecting all the yarn and using up yarn that would otherwise be just kind of sitting around. So I have been working on the blanket. I've added several rounds to this. I'm kind of doing a gray, blue, gray, green, gray, blue, gray, green. So each time I do blue to green, like you can see here, I separate it with gray. So I'm putting the neutral gray in between each of the color rounds. But part of the fun of this has been collecting all the yarn. So when I started, I had 2 bins. Here's my bin here. I had 2 bins of yarn, and as you can see, some of it is from things I frogged that are in Ziploc bags. Most of it has no label. Some of it I just simply overbought, and I just have maybe like 4 of one color that I'll never use. Some of it is from projects that I've started and never finished, and other is just random strands. So I really collected a lot of yarn. Now since our last video for the Stashdown, I went through my yarn stash again because I typically will donate yarn throughout the year to local libraries, the senior center, and other places that collect yarn for different community craft projects and things. So I went through my yarn again looking for donations, and I'm going to grab this other bin here. But I ended up grabbing a whole nother bin. So I found a whole nother bin of shades of blues, greens, and grays. So this blanket is probably going to be pretty big, but I keep finding yarn that is part of my palette of my Stashdown blanket. So let me grab the blanket one more time. So we're using a really interesting square. This is the Box of Color square. The free pattern can be found on the Flux blog, but the first video we did at the beginning of this year for the Stashdown project, I did a full tutorial on that as well. Now I originally was going to do cream also, so cream, gray, blue, and green, but I wasn't loving the way it looked. I liked it with just the gray, blue, and green. So it's been going really well, and holding the 2 strands together, if they're slightly different shades, for example in here I have more of a emerald green, and I held it with more of a forest green, and it gives it some dimension. It gives it a lot of like a, not 3D, but like some color dimension to the yarn. So it's been really fun to kind of hold the strands. And this one I held 2 bulkier strands, and it made a really thick, pronounced kind of ridge in my work. So it's really neat. It has a ton of texture, some dimensional color, and this has been a lot of fun to work on. I'm looking forward to updating you again in the fall. We did kind of a spring summer update here, just because I hadn't gotten too far on this. I've been spending most of the time with this project collecting more yarn, so I hope to add a lot more yarn to this in these summer months when things kind of slow down a little bit. So this is what I have so far. I love all the blankets that you're sharing, all the beautiful color combinations, and it's really exciting to use up some yarn that's just sitting around. So I do like to go through my yarn and donate. So also, just as a side note, if you're going through your yarn and you have yarn that is sitting around and you don't plan on using it for a Stashdown project, consider donating it. I know that there are schools that will accept yarn for crafts, senior centers especially. you know, for some of the groups that they have and get-togethers. You could, I know my library in my community has like a crafter, like a maker space, and they collect yarn donations. They also have a knitting circle there. So any other ideas you have for yarn donations, definitely share down below. And also, if you like, you could donate the blanket when you're finished with it as well. So it could really go to a good cause, and I love the idea of yarn being used versus just sitting around. It's not really doing much, just kind of sitting around. Now, I do have some special skeins that I just kind of admire from time to time, but you know, that's a totally different story. But keep sharing that stuff, all of your beautiful works, any ideas for some donations of, so you could also stash down by donating, like I mentioned before. So share your blankets, and if you're not a member, excuse me, of the Ravelry Crochet Along group, I'll put the link down below for that. But that is kind of like the Flux Crochet Along community, where I share all the updates for our crochet alongs. So we have 3 yearly crochet alongs, and I'll be updating those as well. But we have this one, the Stashdown, and we also have the charity, the year-long charity crochet along. This year we're doing soap sacks. We've partnered up with the soap sack organization to make soap sacks, and I'll update on that soon as well. And also we're doing a year-long temperature project. So I normally do a temperature project and a Stashdown project, but we also added the charity for a year-long crochet along. So we're in the Flux community, we're very, very busy right now. All the makers are just hustling and bustling, and there's so much activity in that group. So I'll put the link down below. And if you're not a member of that group, that's kind of where we go on to share photos. People ask for color combination ideas. You can show off your work. You can get help. There's so many people in there who are kind of like seasoned crochet veterans that really just jump in and help. It's just such a wonderful place to hang out if you're working on the crochet alongs. So I will also be updating the temperature blanket crochet along and the charity crochet along. So if you're working on those 2 projects, definitely stay tuned for those as well. So Stashdown is coming along great. Share those photos and use the hashtag FiberFluxCal to share your work as well. I love seeing all the work, and thank you so much for sharing and getting involved in the community as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I will update you in the fall, and be sure to hit that subscribe button to get all the latest Flux video updates. Thanks again.